Pleasure.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This is Mike Steckline with the Institute for Enterprise Excellence. Hope everyone's having a good day. Got a real treat today. Friend and colleague Debbie McAllister is going to give a presentation on the power of vulnerability in coaching. A very important topic. Get a lot of questions about coaching and how it's different from other functions that lean or improvement support people are doing, as well as coaching by executives and managers. So looking forward to her comments. As far as a little housekeeping, this webinar is being recorded. For those that are participating, you'll get a copy of the recording link, and it's also available for those that weren't able to participate in person but would like to learn from Debbie and her terrific work. And if you've got questions along the way, you can use the chat function to place them there. Our phones, except for Debbie and myself, are muted now. But there will be a time at the end to ask some questions. So I'll open the phone lines, and then again, you can use that chat function as well. When I reviewed what Debbie was going to share with us today, I pondered on our improvement model that we use at the Institute for Enterprise Excellence, and there's two components of that. One is the sustainability model on the left, and the other is the velocity model that I'm showing a part of. And when I was thinking about her topic, a couple things came to mind. One was we think about the guiding principles of enterprise excellence, and in the category of enable, how we enable people, the three principles that we talk about: lead with humility, respect every individual, and learn continuously. I thought a lot about lead with humility, and I think there's a lot there that Debbie's going to share with us. And also in terms of the systems that need to be in place in organizations that are going to drive the ideal behaviors. I know that people eventually realize the need for a coaching system, and what is that going to look like. And so those are some of my thoughts, but I'm going to turn it over to Debbie and have her go through her materials. And Debbie, again, thank you for presenting today. I didn't give background information on your title and whatnot, but I know that you'll give us an intro on that as well. So take it away, Debbie.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for setting this up so I can share my information with the Institute of Enterprise Excellence. And I'm really thrilled to be here. So as Mike said, my name is Debbie McAllister, and I'm a leadership coach. So I wanted to share a little bit more about coaching and how it can really impact the sustainability of the lean performance improvement. So I want to thank everybody for joining us with all of your busy schedules and time restraints, and hope you're enjoying your Friday here. So one of the questions before I jump into my material is, how do we sustain the changes we are making? And that is what I'd like to be able to bring to you today in the material, The Power of Vulnerability in Coaching. So here's why I'm so committed to bringing these changes to you. One of the books, I'm a big reader, was Start With Why, from Simon. And my big why is to bring a mission to eliminate all patient harm in healthcare by partnering with and guiding executive directors and managers through their transformation into servant leaders. So if you will follow me to a flashback, about 6 years ago, I was doing Lean Six Sigma work in the high technology industry. And my family had the opportunity to do a deep dive into healthcare. Due to our experiences in healthcare and the ultimate premature death of my dad, through misdiagnosis, broken process flows with access to care, scheduling of diagnosis tests, and receiving the test results, it really showed me that there was a big gap in his care. And so after his death in 2011, I made the change over from high technology to healthcare. And that's how it came through my mission to be able to eliminate all patient harm in healthcare. And I do that through the leadership and through Lean. And so I believe that getting access to care and the right diagnosis at the right time, at the right place. And so I want to be able to help your organization to sustain the changes that you've worked so hard to achieve. So The arrows have, okay, there it goes. The arrows disappeared there for a moment. Sorry. So, vulnerability. Am I in the right webinar? I was kind of joking around with Mike about this because we don't really hear about vulnerability in the lean industry. And so you are in the right place. If you have worked really hard to make improvements in your organization, you pull your teams together, you pull together a good cross-functional team, you get the right people in the room, and they do some really great work with creating some standard work that's rolled out, it's understood, and then you come back, 6 months, 9 months later, and some of the changes haven't sustained, and they haven't gone through the PDSA cycle of even making the adjustments on the standard work. And if you've gone through this, then you are in the right place. And that is part of why I also wanted to bring this together. So today I'm going to walk you through how being vulnerable in your coaching with your lean performance improvement systems can support your transformation by improving your sustainability, increasing your employee satisfaction. And how to help your leaders lead through lean and struggling to sustain the changes and going through all of the motions with your leaders. So my background that I briefly touched on was that I have 15 years doing Lean Six Sigma work, did 10 years additional where I've been in businesses and different industries with startups and myself an entrepreneur and doing some coaching. My formal education has a bachelor's in business management, and I'm about 4 classes away from finishing my MHA. And then I've done an extensive amount of coaching courses and personal development programs over the years. So one of the things that changed for me as I was going through this work was that I was sent off to do some training and to improve my coaching and how I was interacting with lean professionals. And what I discovered was really kind of mind-shattering for me. And it really changed how I implement the lean process improvement in the work that we're doing. So my focus began to shift from doing just the tools into creating the culture that we sustain through servant leadership. And so as my coaching became more focused on individuals, I started to see where the changes were sustaining and how really started to see the behaviors that we wanted to change in the area. So I started to see it collaborating together between coaching and sustainability. And that's why I'm so passionate about coaching and what we have been changed from being more focused on us and our tools and how we engage our staff. And so that's what I'm actually going to share with you. So the objectives is that I'm going to go through our building the coaching partnership, how to begin the coaching, go through how I see what is vulnerability and why be vulnerable. So by the end of our time together, I'm hoping that you will have some tools here that you will be able to use in your organization. And so in building the coaching partnership, I see the 3 circles here of trust, vulnerability, and humility, where they all come together to be able to build the change. Oop, it skipped a slide. Oop, it's going the wrong way. These aren't going the way I'm supposed to, sorry. Technical. Okay. So, trust. So, one of the greatest resources that I've come across, and I really admire, is the book, The Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey. He really quantifies how we lay the foundation of trust and how it can be materialized. So he published this book in 2006, and as I'm sure many of you who are on this call have read, but as a refresher about what he talks about is that there's actually economics in building trust and partnership with our leaders. So when we have a decreased trust in our organization, what happens is that the speed of our decisions goes slower, which creates the increased cost. So for example, have you ever been in a meeting where you're trying to figure out a new process or a new system that you're trying to put in place, and perhaps you have 8 people in the room, and the group starts to talk through the processes, and the group can't agree to what steps or what decisions should be used. So you might have two or three people who are experts in the same area, and they're not willing to really trust each other's ideas, and you can't come to any type of consensus on how to move forward. This is really showing you the lack of trust that the colleagues have in each other. Um, when you're in a department, or an organization where you can all come together and ask very specific questions, just to get clarification on what those ideas and the new processes being proposed are, you can actually get consensus to move forward and try it. And so they're really trying to more based upon the trust that they have in the relationship uh, with you to try that experiment with the new process. So it really shows you that they trust each other, and they know that if you move forward with this proposed process, that if there's any areas where they have questions, or they can come to you and just ask the questions, and then you can help them through. So it actually speeds up how fast an organization can move forward. So when you increase the trust, it it speeds up the how fast you can actually make any type of decisions moving forward, and that will, because of the time factor, will actually decrease your amount of cost. So only 51% of employees have trust and confidence in their senior management. It's kind of a low number. Only 36% of employees believe their leaders act with honesty and integrity. Pretty staggering data points. So intangible and unquantifiable to an indispensable factor that is both tangible and quantifiable. So Stephen Covey outlines where there's 5 waves of trust. The first one is the self-trust, relationship trust, organizational trust, market trust, and societal trust. And so what I'm really going to outline more is the relational trust as you're building your coaching partnerships. So he outlines these 13 behaviors as the straight talk, demonstrate respect, create transparency, right wrongs, show loyalty, deliver results, get better, confront reality, practice accountability, listen first, keep commitments, extend trust, and create an action plan. And when you look at these behaviors, you can really see how this links into the behaviors that are demonstrated through a lean management system, and as we build in the original philosophies of respect for people and leading with humility. And so it's further demonstrated back another of one of my artists. One of my favorite books is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Laniosi. I struggle with his name, so my apologies. But what I wanted to really highlight on this is on the very foundation of how you build the foundation of a team is trust. So members of teams with an absence of trust actually demonstrate the following behaviors. They conceal their weaknesses and mistakes from each other. They hesitate to ask for help or provide constructive feedback. Um, they hesitate to offer help outside of their own area of responsibilities. They fail to recognize and tap into one another's skills and experiences. They hold grudges. They dread meetings and find reasons to avoid spending time together. So you might see this if you go to huddles. If you go to team meetings, you could see some of these type of behaviors actually being demonstrated. You don't if you observe the meetings and you see how they're interacting, this is where I commonly see this when organizations are starting their performance improvement work. So when I go through and I think of humility, one of my favorite sayings is here is humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. This is really where we start our focus off of us as a coach and start focusing on our clients. So the next step that I would do would be then to build in building this coaching partnership is I go and I start setting up meetings when I come into an organization, whether it's I'm being recently assigned or I'm starting in a new group. I go to set up the meetings and I go through and find out around their time. I make this whole partnership about them, not myself. And so we set up the meetings around what is available for them. Now, this might take a little longer. if you're meeting with a big group of individuals as you come into an organization or go back into an organization that you're already partnering with, um, I'm scheduling around their time. I go into their specific area, even if they want to come to where my work area is. It's there's a reason why I want to go to their area, and I'm really looking for a very sincere way to connect with them. So when I go to their areas, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for some visual signs of how I can connect my own personal experiences with who they are as a person and their personal experiences. So one of the examples of that is I look around for pictures. Perhaps it's their family, it's a vacation. There could be diplomas on the wall. They could be collecting um, certain things from their travels, or even if it's plants. And I look for insights from what is actually posted or not posted in their areas. And I try to make a sincere connection based upon my own life experiences with what I'm seeing there. Um, and so that connection is really not about checking a box that I'm okay, I connected with them. They gave me the responses I need. I'm actually going to see how I can easily connect my life experiences with them. So I'm trying to see what is important to them is when I walk into their office, that is the question I'm asking myself. What is important to them? So once we set and we have our initial communication with each other and meeting and getting to know each other, we want to set ground rules for what those expectations are. Um, and that could be with trying to understand what is their preferences to communicate. So it sounds kind of simple, but I might be an emailer, and they might be somebody who wants you to just pick up the phone or they want you to stop by. And so I'm asking for their type of preferences. I'm trying to find out when is their busiest time. Am I going to schedule a meeting on Monday when that is their busiest time of the week, or on Fridays? Maybe they're doing payroll or time cards. And so I'm trying to schedule it around when I know it's not their peak time so that they're able to really focus on our relationship and what we're doing together. Part of that is also trying to figure out what is the expectations of the cadence of our frequency. Are we going to meet daily? Are we going to meet weekly? Or are we going to meet monthly? And so making it about my client, I'm going to go with and meet them where they are. I'm not going to force myself onto where we want them to go, but first meet them with where they are. And I want to set up the communication that when we're working together and we're coaching together, that it's really clear and we actually say, you know, if I leave them with a question, that they ponder that question. And I'm writing that question down in my own personal journal with the expectations that they're going to think about and reflect upon the questions that we're asking about. So my part of that is if I'm not able to ask a question that they have of me, is that I write that question down and I tell them if I don't have the answer, that I will go find the answer and I will get back to you. So in keeping that commitment, I need to get back to them by the end of that same day, even if it's just a status of what that question is, so that they know that I haven't forgotten about them. And and I always show up early, a few minutes early before every meeting because I'm really demonstrating that I really respect their time and what they're having, that they've set a time for myself. So the other thing that I've really have noticed, and I've seen the change in myself, and from when I originally was coaching to what I try to demonstrate every day, is that um, if say I'm having a bad day, and I might have had a really hard time or challenging time getting to meeting this appointment. Maybe my calendar is overscheduled, and so when I show up, what I have to remember is I have to turn the switch off mentally in my mind that this is all about them, and it is about listening and putting whatever my day was, and my focus becomes completely on them, being very mindful of where my thoughts are going and listening to them. Now, sometimes what happens also is that you show up and they're having a very bad day. Maybe some things have happened in their schedule or their staff, or perhaps there's something going on that you're not aware of. And so what I do is I actually take the time and I just listen to what they need to actually express. So I might have to put aside what I had on my agenda or my objective to get out through that. And I have to remember that they're people, and that if we're forming a longer term relationship that is built upon trust and humility, that I need to put aside what I want to get done and just listen to them. And sometimes it just takes a few minutes for them to express this. And then sometimes it might take my meeting, and then I have to go back and account for that later in my own time, and we reschedule. But what it does is it actually shows that I do really do care for them, and sometimes I have to put that aside. So John Maxwell has a quote from one of his books: is that you first have to connect with the heart before you can ask for for a hand. And so what I want to really emphasize is this is about the person and not about what the person can actually do for you, and that you have to be sincere in all your efforts, even on the days where you're struggling to have a good day yourself. And so I've plugged in, and I'm not sure how readable these are, but these are in Word docs. I'd be more than happy to share with you. But I actually created a partnership, a participant partnership, and then it clearly states it's established the environment for vulnerability. So I've outlined how I like to proceed with my partnership, and I have them read it and go through it, and I can leave it with them depending on who I'm working with, and they can go through and read it and see if they're willing to meet me here as far as in establishing part of our coaching agreement. And so what it says is, I will not judge where you are yesterday, today, or tomorrow. I will make every effort to overcome my own thoughts to make this about you by listening first and being curious. I will make every effort daily to spend time to reflect how my words and actions can have an impact that may not match my intention. I will make every effort to express my ideas and feelings openly and not fear the rejection, frustration, confusion, or laughter of others. If they want to add something here, I would gladly have them handwrite that in on their own agreement. And I will return to my 5-year-old mindset who believes in the magic of the world. And probably one of our most famous words here used in the lean world is, I will trust the process. There's also a vulnerability exercise, and I'm just showing you that I have this. I'm actually not going to go into this in details, but I do have a vulnerability exercise that I'd be more than willing to share if anybody is interested. So in the next steps of what I do then is I want to begin how I'm doing the coaching. And so the first thing I do is I ask their permission. Do they want to receive coaching from me? It's a clear yes or no answer, purposely a closed-in question. And it sounds kind of simple, but you might, if you're in an organization, you might have been assigned to coach somebody who doesn't necessarily want to receive coaching from you. You know, they might be coaching to be checking a box from another executive. And so I ask them, I want to know up front if they want to actually receive coaching or not. And being curious, are they ready to do this or not? Are they curious to learn what this coaching is about? And so in this, it opens up parts of vulnerability by simply being curious and asking their permission. It's made myself vulnerable because I have had coaches or process owners say, no, they do not want to be coached by me. And at least at that point, I have a very honest way and a foundation of where that person is and how I can meet them. And then it gives us another option to figure out what do we need to go to do from there. And in part of beginning this coaching relationship, I want to understand how my client learns. There's the seven ways that adults learn, and because this is all about them. And so if you're not familiar with those, there's the visual, physical, orals, which is the sound, verbal, somebody uses words, um, the logical. So these are usually the people who like to read. A lot of readers are in the logical or social. They like to do things in big groups, or solitaire, where they do a lot of self-study. And so in understanding, a lot of adult learners will be able to explain to you why and how they learn. So about 75% of adults actually fall into the visual. And so That might include where you're doing a lot of drawing, which is what I do. I'm not an artist, but I do draw frequently when I am explaining things to people. So, another example is if they're not a reader, you might want to think about more creative ways of how you can have them do some of the study. So you might help them find specific webinars, maybe videos. Through YouTube has a lot of different videos, or you probably have them in your stash and doing educational or audio books. I know for logical people, there's a lot of books that they like to read, and so I really try to figure out which works best for them. And you can ask them. Most people who we're working with at this point are really familiar with how their own educational style is. And then I find out what those resources is and how do I connect them with them. Because I might be a huge book reader, but my client may not like to read, and so I need to step away from how I like to learn, and I need to make it again about them. So, and you begin the coaching, and you've heard me say this, and I do say it a lot, that it really isn't about us, it's about our clients. And so, active listening is something that is really not taught. We really have to be very mindful and focus on our client and listening to them. And part of active listening is not thinking about the next question we're going to ask. It's truly listening through their body language and what they're not saying, as well as what they are saying. And so, one of my coaches drew this for me many years ago, and it shows a person with big ears and big eyes and a really small mouth. And so, it's really asking the questions, open-ended questions, and then listening to what they have to say and showing up for them. And so I emphasize that a lot, is that you show up, you show up, you show up, being very mindful of what they have to say and stopping our own ability to want to tell them what we want them to hear and really listening to what they're having to say. And so the title of this webinar was The Power of Vulnerability and Coaching. And so, what is vulnerability? I've been talking about um, coaching relationships and how we build them. And so, when you go to the dictionary, it actually says that the vulnerability is the quality of state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked, harmed, or physically or emotionally. It doesn't sound real positive, does it? But Renee Brown, who really is a huge vulnerability expert, says that vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Vulnerability is not a weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage. And so, what is that? What does that look like to you, and how you can interpret it into how we show up and be vulnerable in our coaching? So, my definition of vulnerability is I show up as myself. I integrate all parts of myself, and I show up to hold the space for my client who is going through the change. And that to me is how vulnerability is, just being very mindful of their time, of who they are. And I think through the whole focus of the change cycle, which includes, the resistance and the denial, and then they go through the chaos and confusion, and then they start to accept the change that's actually happening. And then they move into now that next phase of status quo before you start that cycle again, as they go through and are learning different things about what we are showing them in our lean world and the cultural change. And so um, vulnerability is really key here. If you're going to come to a point where you're asking your client to do new behaviors and those behaviors are not what got them there, our leaders have always been in control. They come to a point where what got them to their roles is not actually what's going to get them through this new cultural change. And so as we are working with them, they're going to come to a point where they're going to make a mistake. And that's vulnerability, that a leader who's always been in control to be able to make a mistake, and that it's okay to make that mistake, and that we're actually there to help them through that. That you're not going to walk away from them. You're going to partner with them and be there with them. There's also going to be a time where they're going to become frustrated with the new ways and the old ways, and how we can hold that space for them. What I consider in a gentle or an accountable way. And this might look different for each one of your clients. So if there's trust built in this relationship with them, you can walk with them through being this vulnerability with the new behaviors until it becomes who they are in an unconscious manner. So as they're practicing, it's through their conscious behavior. And with enough practice, it starts to integrate into their unconscious behavior. If you've seen the bike about the video that's out on YouTube about the backward bicycle, it talks through your conscious and your unconscious with new behaviors and what that actually looks like and materializes with. So if vulnerability is something new, there's actually um, some things that will help you through understanding more about vulnerability with yourself so that you can help coach your clients through that. So if you're brave enough, you will fail. That means as you go through this and you start establishing more vulnerability in your coaching clients, know that you're going to make a mistake and you're going to fall yourself, because that happens when we put ourselves out there at times. And once you fall into to the service of being brave and being vulnerable, you can actually never go back. You can't unlearn a behavior because it just becomes who you are. And that's how we model changing our own behaviors from unconsciously trying new behaviors to where it becomes unconsciously. Um, and then nobody really goes this alone. There are points in time when all of us are going through new behaviors and changes, and we need to know that there's somebody there who understands the process of where we're trying to move our clients through. And we're wired for story. So this is, in my mind, where we're going through and they need to connect this through other times, or we can help them connect through times where they've gone through change in their life and how did they go through that, what did it look like for them. um, and the creativity of practice, practice, practice is if we go from moving from our heads to our hearts through our hands and going through service. So Rising Strong, and that's the name of the Renee Brown's book, Rising Strong. So and this was one of those points that she talked about that I struggled to actually navigate through myself when that was when we're going through any type of change, whether it's personal or professional, it's actually the same process. So we don't have a version of us that's a work version and a professional version. It's actually when we integrate all of those into us that we're actually able to connect more with our people and who we lead, and the ability and the willingness to learn through that discomfort and vulnerability will actually make us a much better leader. So comparative suffering is a function of fear and scarcity. So when you start practicing more empathy and compassion with someone, there's actually more of it to go around and not less. And so the other key point on here is that hurt is hurt. So if we're in a work environment and somebody or a home environment and there's something that's said and it actually affects them, we need to honor that and with compassion and empathy. I also call it being gentle, and know that we can work through that with being vulnerable and helping them through that. So you can't engineer emotional vulnerability and courage in a process that's easy. That it's not a one size fits all for everybody. Um, and then really, we when we say here on point 10, rising strong is a spiritual practice, that doesn't necessarily mean religion. It means that our belief in each other is an interconnectedness, and that everything we do is really for a greater good of bringing change into our organization. So, practicing. Do we want to practice before we are ready? Most things that we try to do, we want to be prepared. We want to go out with our clients and know that we're going to be doing this great job. But I highly encourage you to go through and practice before you're even ready. Be that model for your client, um, and share with them that you're practicing a new way of showing up. And by you modeling that behavior, it then gives them permission to model that behavior with themselves. And you can go through and explain to them what you're actually doing. So, why be vulnerable? Um, so, our ability to be really open and vulnerable really establishes a deep level of trust. And there's a lot of research that supports this, that when we show up on who we are, even on our own transformation of how we coach, it does transform whoever we are coaching by showing our own vulnerability. And I've used the word showing up a lot, and that really is my way of saying when I show up, I turn off that whatever stories are going in my head about my life or my work or a previous client, and I'm showing up and I'm being completely focused on them. It's all about them, and it's probably where I've seen some of the best coaches who've coached me and colleagues that I've worked with. Um, is that they're truly showing up and focusing and making it about the sessions that we're actually working with. So, in part of this, when I go through my practice behaviors, like how do you show this with them? You can practice with your leaders, behind an area where they feel comfortable with. Maybe it's in a more confidential area, is one way. But I personally like to ask two primary questions when I'm working with them, and one of them is, what was your intention? And how would that individual or that group know your intention? And what would you like them to walk away knowing? So having a leader being really aware of their intentions as they go into a huddle, is it to listen? Is it to learn about their staff? Or is it to tell? By being really focused on what their intentions are, it will at least give them the awareness to begin to stop the telling. Um, because what got them there is generally that they were great grow, problem solvers, and that they're used to telling, and that their staff is actually used to them solving the problems, and so they want to listen. So when they're actually able to go and state their intentions to a team, to a huddle, to a meeting, to where they are, and that they're going to be showing this new behavior, how that shows up is they don't need to even use the word vulnerable. They can just ask their staff for help, and that they're trying new behaviors. That in itself is demonstrating vulnerability. And I've seen that demonstrated multiple times with a high level of success. It actually softens a group to understand that, wow, they're actually us for help. And it starts to develop a new level of trust and engagement with the staff. And really start opening the way for them to see the new behaviors. So here are some of my tips that I've learned along the way. Um, as you practice being vulnerable for your clients, um, you're going to have more emotions come up for you. And your clients are going to have more emotions come up because really um, nobody likes change. We're people too. The only people who really like change is, maybe a wet baby. And that's my one joke here for the webinar, but that I use. But in showing emotions, in it could come up with tears, it could come up with some frustrations, or it could come up where they just don't really want to move ahead and receive any more coaching from you in that moment of time. And so what I've realized is that those are moments where you need to go behind closed doors and have your clients express these emotions. So I personally have had about 90% of my clients at some point in the relationship break down through frustration or tears, um, through as they're working through the changes. And so during that moments when this first started to happen, it was it was pretty uncomfortable for me. Um, and then as I became more comfortable with it, what I realized is that I have a really um, high empathy level. It comes up in all the different type of assessment tests, and so it's really high. And what started to happen is that I would actually get tears in my eyes as I was working through them showing their emotions, and so that was extremely uncomfortable for me because I didn't want to be seen as somebody who wasn't very professional. But what I have found is I need to also do what we tell our clients, and that's to trust the process. And so what I have found out is that after that session is over, is that they generally have a breakthrough with their own staff. And part of that is that they now have learned how to hold that space. So in those moments where there's some emotions being shared, I don't try to stop the emotions. I really hold the space for somebody to have those emotions. I don't quickly reach for even Kleenex. Um, what I will do is I actually will ask the client when they're in this is, what do they need? And generally they just need to talk and share and let whatever has been building up inside of them to really come up for that, to really come out and share it. And I hold whatever is being shared extremely close to my heart with confidentiality, and know that, and I share that with them, that this will not be shared. This is between our relationship and our partnership that we had agreed to. And generally speaking, what I've noticed is after the emotions are cleared and they go out now and they're talking with their staff, when their staff is having the moment of frustration, they then can model that behavior of, let's get this into a more confidential environment for them with that respect for the individual, and let them share what needs to come through. Usually these emotions don't necessarily translate into something that is something that's really wrong. It's usually a accumulation of all of the change that's happening. So it really allows them to have some empathy for their staff as they go through the changes that they're also trying to implement. So um, one of the quotes that I wanted to share with you, I actually have three of them. So if you'll bear with me, one of them is that the heart of change is in the emotions, and that was by John Cotter, who is a really well-known change expert in the heart of change. And know that every person in the organization must change inside their hearts and minds so that they themselves can become principle centered. And I know that's by Stephen Covey. And with the work that we're doing here is we're really trying to instill the principles of our organizations. So you'll never change your life until you change something you do daily. The secret of your success is found in your daily routines, and that's by John C. Maxwell. Um, so what are your questions?
Thanks, Debbie. That was terrific. I've unmuted the phones if anyone does have questions. If you'd like to type something on the chat function, please feel free to do so. I'll pause here for a bit and see if there are any questions. A question I was thinking about, Debbie, is if you had any insights on if there's one thing you would have done differently as you pursued becoming more of a, call it a coach in work. Is there one thing you would have done differently? Can you think of anything, maybe an early learning or something like that?
I do. And I was fortunate enough to have a colleague who I was able to work through this with, and we kind of highlighted it for each other. But I think what I would have done much earlier in my career is I would have made it about the client, truly about the client. I can remember walking into coaching sessions and something was going on, whether in my lean department or outside of my world, my real life, and I wasn't able to separate that. I wasn't able to make myself neutral and really focus on the client. And so, I used to set up meetings more around my schedule, my availability, because I was so busy. But really, when I focused deeply without consciously having to think about it, making it about them and what they were going through, then I really saw a huge shift in my clients and at the pace that they were able to move through the change, because I was modeling the behavior that we were trying to have them do out in their work groups with their group using the lean tools. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wish I had done that much earlier. And so, and I had a colleague that helped keep me accountable for that. So we had a partnership ourselves, and I continue that partnership, and it really makes a big difference. So if they're holding me accountable, maybe in a meeting I somehow made it more focused about myself, they can hold me accountable and say, hey, how you doing today? And that just triggers me, oh, I made this about me. It was
Mm-hmm.
really about them. And
Okay,
so that was one of my big insights. So I have my own accountability partner to make sure I am continually focusing on my client.
that's great advice. I like that. I'll pause again to see if anyone else has any questions. Here's a question that came up. How do you handle it when a leader answers yes, that they do want to be coached, but they don't demonstrate that they really want that coaching? For example, they don't follow through and verbally describes reluctance carrying out any actions for improvement.
That's a great question. Um, so they're saying they want to be coached, but then they don't demonstrate it. So I'll just take the first part. They don't follow through. So part of being vulnerable, and they signed your partnership agreement. You've gone through. They say yes. You guys have sat down, set those expectations up, and what it looked like. And so I will ask them an open-ended question. What is their intention? And these are my very specific examples of where I've seen that they're not following through. What can I do to help them?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I allow, and I don't answer the question. I don't jump in with suggestions. Oh, I know you've been busy with this. I ask a question, and I ask them that directly.
Okay.
You've stated you want to be coached, and this is what I'm seeing. What is really in your way to be able to meet this partnership? Do we need to revisit our partnership and what that looks like?
Super. Great.
And also, when we talk about behaviors, if somebody's saying one thing and they're doing another, they may not want to be coached. So that's why I bring it back and I will ask those tough questions. I go back to, again, one of my most leading questions is, what is their intention? In looking at their partnership as well. So, what is your intentions with this? This is the behaviors we've seen. And then I pause. And if they don't have an answer, I ask them to reflect it. And then when do we want to regroup? I again put it back on them to come back to me of when they want to regroup to provide me this response.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. I like that. A question here, and you addressed this in your webinar. Can you share the coaching agreement with us via email? And yes, we've done that before, and I'll work with Debbie to make whatever she's willing to make available to anyone that participated today, and also on our website for others that weren't able to participate today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd gladly share that document. And so, feel free to modify it as well.
Sure.
To what works for your organization, or there's specific words that actually work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Feel free to modify it.
Here's a question. How do you exit or proceed if a leader says no to coaching?
So this isn't a straight yes or no linear answer.
What's up? This is the iPad.
Mm-hmm.
Is that depending on how your organization is set up. So is there another coach in your group that they would like to work with? Or who would they like to work with? Or do they just not want to be receiving coaching at that point in time? And so I generally like to work with people who are pulling to be coached. And so say you have 5 leaders and one of the leaders has said no, I just let them be for a period of time. I might come back to them in a month or 2 months or 3 months and start that conversation up, because you can't force anybody to be coached.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good advice.
They have to want to be coached. So generally, you have enough pool with multiple people that you are coaching that you can then go focus your attention on where the greatest pool is, and then come back and check with them.
Okay. Here's a follow-up question. It says, how do you offer the coaching?
Yeah,
How do I offer the coaching? So I'm trying to get trying to put that in context.
I know that
How do
earlier
I offer my coaching?
you were talking about the setting up the contract and how would you like to get together. And I think somewhere within there, the person asking the question says, so how do you offer the availability of being a coach, or how do you offer that to them?
So, depending on how your organization is rolling out lean or performance improvement, maybe you're modeling, maybe you're working on a value stream, and maybe you're already into and having some type of relationship. I would even pause and say that you'd like to have a
What was that, Debbie? It broke off.
whole conversation. That you've been working together, and that you're always.
That
Am I
last
muted?
part.
You were
That last
unmuted.
part.
Sorry.
Could you
You
repeat
got
that
muted?
last?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
repeat the
So,
last part. I had there was background noise, and I put us back on mute. So just
okay. Okay, no worries. So, so perhaps, because I don't really understand the content completely. So, so if I don't answer your question, please help me. But so say you're running and you're in a value stream and you're working with your process owner and you've already have some type of relationship going. You can always pause at any given time and begin to have a relationship and set up some one-on-one time with the person that you're working with. Say it's your process owner or an executive sponsor. You can always pause and say you'd like to restart some of this and you're trying to improve yourself as a coach, and would they be willing to play? Again, I'm asking permission for them if they'd like to do this or not.
mhm.
I don't make assumptions that they want to. I say it out loud, and then we get together and we go through and we create what our new partnership will happen. So that really helps too. If there's where you're finding maybe a process owner isn't meeting their commitments. Maybe they miss meetings, maybe they're always late, or they don't have enough time. And so I can always pause and either restart a partnership agreement with them as coaching, or I can start a new one.
Mhm. Okay, that's helpful. Great. Um, One thing I was thinking about, and it gets into a little bit about the coaching system that an organization may want to put into place. And we often see this where people have internal resources, such as yourself, that are available to help coach others. But then, if you're trying to help leaders become better coaches for their team, um, how do you manage all of the different coaching that could be going on? Because a person, how much advice could a person receive if they're getting suggestions or coaching from two or three different avenues?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess I would look at why are they receiving so many different avenues of coaching, um, and what the intention is of each of those agreements.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe one person is more focused on the tools, and you're there to help them, um, and you're shadowing them. So what I've typically done um, is that you might maybe you're spending 15 minutes with them every day as they go to their huddle, and you're observing their behaviors there. Or perhaps it's different where maybe you're spending the whole day with them and you're just cycling through all of their meetings that they're going through, or they're walking out in the Gemba and just their interactions.
Mm-hmm.
And you're
Okay.
kind of like a shadow with your journal, and you're writing down what they are saying, not what the conversation is about, but their reactions to the saying. And one of the common things I get asked when we go through those type of sessions is, how did I do? And I like to really turn that around and ask them, how do they think they did? And then let them voice what their opinion is on how they're doing. Um, and so it really puts the reflection back and the awareness back to the leader that you're coaching. And so if if over and over they really aren't able to do that reflection, then what I will do is I'll verbally say, okay, I can see that you're struggling here. Let me put my educator hat on, not my coach hat, and let me help you through that. Here's here's what I heard from you. And that you could point out maybe there was more open-ended questions versus a yes or no question.
Yeah,
And how could they perhaps rephrase that to meet their intention?
that's great. I like that.
The,
Okay,
some of the
super.
ways. Mm-hmm.
Well, what I'm going to do is proceed on with some closing slides. But again, I want to thank Debbie for taking the time to put this together. And we will follow up with things, the commitments that we made on here as far as follow-up materials. What's going to happen next is the recording from today's session is going to be moved over to where you'll see the recordings on our website, and you can see the link there, so you'll have access to it there. And this is where you'll always also find links to those reference materials that Debbie was talking about. We've got another webinar coming up end of April. We're building a white paper, have been doing it for a while. This is going to be the compilation of some learnings to date on the Pracademics Guide to Strategy Deployment. We're calling it Part 1 because there's lots of learnings there. So that's going to be Friday, April 28th. You can see on the date. And then in May 26th, I've got a date. Don't yet have confirmation of a time. Sammy Bari, who is known as the first lean dentist out of Jacksonville, Florida, has got some great material to present. He's the author of that book, The Lean Dentist, that you can see on your screen, but he's going to give us a bit of his time in May, and we're going to be learning from Sammy. So if you want to make sure that you get the details on that time, just send me an email. There's my email address there, and I will be sending it out to the distribution list once I have that time solidified. And then finally, if you've got a story that you'd like to share in terms of a webinar, such as what Debbie has shared today, or if you have a request for something that's of interest to you that you would like to have some discussion about, feel free to send it my way. You can also join our group on LinkedIn, the Pracademic Learning and Sharing Network, and that's another way to handle it. So again, Debbie, I want to thank you for taking the time to present today and the great presentation you gave. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen today. And I hope everyone has a good day and a good weekend coming up. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.